In the far corners of the city, beyond the shimmering skyline and the marble towers where the wealthy lived, was a cluttered district full of second-hand shops, steaming street food, and shadows that stretched long after sunset. It was here that Alara lived, not because she wanted to, but because fate had stranded her there with her ailing father and a suitcase of old photographs. Alara was no ordinary girl, though nothing about her life would suggest it. She walked with the poise of someone born to simplicity, but her eyes carried the weight of unspoken things. She worked nights in a rundown pharmacy, mixing herbs and boiling decoctions, tending to people who paid with change and gratitude. Her father, once a renowned biologist, lay confined to bed with a rare degenerative illness. Medicines cost more than hope, and hope was already scarce. But Alara never stopped. She cooked, cleaned, studied his notes, and waited. For what, she didn't know. Only that something inside her was waiting to be awakened. Across the river, inside a skyscraper wrapped in mirrored glass, Kiran ruled the corporate world like a storm in a tailored suit. At 32, he was a self-made billionaire, CEO of the vast Shintech conglomerate, and a mystery to the media. But beneath the power, Kiran carried a secret, a terminal illness that even the best doctors couldn't cure. It was a rare blood disorder, slow and unrelenting. His body rejected transfusions, his cells collapsed under experimental therapies, and each day his strength waned. He had accepted death. What he hadn't accepted was fear. Until the night the rain came. The storm hit the city with a vengeance that evening. Thunder cracked across the sky like the earth itself was in revolt. Alara had just stepped out of the pharmacy, her shawl pulled tightly around her, a thermos of herbal broth in one hand, when the crowd parted for something, or someone, coming down the alley. A man in black stumbled through the darkness. He was tall, drenched in rain, and his face pale as porcelain under the flickering streetlight. His steps faltered, knees buckled, and before Alara could process the moment, he collapsed. The thermos clattered to the ground. "Help!" she cried to no one. The alley remained indifferent. Kneeling beside the man, she checked his pulse. Faint. Shallow. But still there. His lips were blue. She touched his forehead, it burned. His skin was cold. Instinct kicked in. The clinic was nearly empty, save for one old nurse who owed Alara's father a favor. Together, they moved the stranger onto a cot, wiping the rain off him. As the nurse prepared 4 lines and oxygen, the man began to convulse. "We need blood," the nurse said, panicked. "But his type is rare, AB negative, and it's already rejecting stored blood." Alara stared at the monitor. Something was wrong. His body wasn't rejecting ordinary blood, it was disintegrating it. And then it came to her, madness or desperation. She rolled up her sleeve. "Try mine," she said. The nurse hesitated. "Alara, we don't even know if—" "Try it," she repeated, firmer this time. The blood flowed. Something happened. The machine stabilized. The convulsions stopped. The stranger's breath came steady. The pale returned to color. But it wasn't just survival, it was reaction. The nurse gasped. "Your blood, it's glowing." Alara stared in disbelief. The vein in her arm shimmered with a faint blue hue. Not bright. Not blinding. Just unnatural. And in the cot, the man whispered the first word since he arrived. Alara. 2 days later, in a private hospital suite surrounded by glass walls and silent machines, Kiran opened his eyes. At first, all he could feel was breath. Deep, real breath. The ache in his joints was gone. The heaviness that had become his constant companion had lifted. He looked down at his hands, color had returned. His heart was steady. The attending physician stood at his side, wide-eyed. "Sir? I don't know how to explain it, but you're healing." Kiran sat up. "Where's the girl?" "What girl?" "The one who saved me." I remember her voice. Her hand was warm. He closed his eyes again. She said, "Try mine." Karen's team traced every movement from that stormy night. Footage showed him collapsing near the East District, a zone his security never entered. But after that, there was nothing. No records of who brought him in. No hospital logs of a donor. The systems had been wiped clean. "I want every trace uncovered," he ordered. He couldn't stop thinking about her, her face blurry in memory, but her presence unforgettable. He didn't just want to thank her. He needed to know what her blood had done. Meanwhile, Alara stayed hidden. She had seen the name on his ID, Kieran Shin. She had heard of him. Who hadn't? She had expected silence. Maybe a message of thanks. But not an investigation. Not patrol cars outside the alley. Not strangers asking questions. Alara knew something wasn't right. Her blood had never glowed before, but her father once warned her, during one of his fevered rants. "Your blood is a key, Alara. Some doors must never open." Alara sat by her father's bedside, a tattered journal open on her lap. His fever had worsened, and his breaths came shallow and uneven. Her own heart beat with dread, not just for him, but for what she was beginning to remember. Inside the journal were sketches of molecular structures, blood diagrams, strange equations. But between the notes, there were scribbled names. One of them stood out, Shin Biomedical Division, Project Snowcore. She turned the page and gasped. There was a photo, aged and torn, of her father, standing next to a much younger Master Shin, the grandfather of Kieran Shin. The heading read, "Regeneration through Bioreactive Plasma, Bloodline Activation Theory." Her father had once worked with them. He had once been part of them. Kieran stared at the projected image on his office screen, a partial facial recognition match, captured from a street camera near the pharmacy. The girl who saved him was real. Alive. Nearby. And she was afraid. Her name is Alara Quinn, his assistant confirmed. No birth records after age 5. No formal education. But high scores on private medical forums under anonymous handles. Her father was once a lead researcher in your grandfather's lab, but he disappeared 2 decades ago. Kieran leaned back. The glowing blood. The impossible recovery. The missing files. "She's the key," he said softly. "Not just to me, but to everything." He wasn't sure what terrified him more, the fact that her blood had saved his life. Or that others might want to take it. That night, Alara heard the knock at the door. 2 men in suits stood outside. They wore smiles too thin to trust. "We're from Shin Foundation Medical. We'd like to talk about your recent heroics." She shut the door. They returned the next morning. This time, with a van parked nearby. Alara packed her things, her father's journal, a vial of her own blood, and the emergency fund she'd hidden under the floorboards. It was time to disappear. Again. But this time, she wasn't alone. A black car pulled up across the street. And Kieran Shin stepped out. Alara froze. The street fell silent. Her hand clutched her father's journal tighter as Kieran stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as if approaching a wild creature poised to flee. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I just want to talk." Alara's jaw tightened. "Talk? After sending people to stalk me?" "That wasn't me," Kieran replied quickly. "Not like that." "Yes, I was searching for you. You saved my life. And something else happened. Something beyond medicine. I think you already know." She didn't answer. But she didn't run either. Kieran held out his hand. "Come with me. Let's figure this out together." Her eyes met his, dark and cautious, but flickering with curiosity. The man before her wasn't a cold CEO. He looked lost. Human. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she stepped forward. The Shin estate was nothing like Alara had imagined. There were no glass towers or chrome hallways, only silence, wood, and shadowed corners that remembered too much. In a private study, Kieran laid out documents from the archives, Project Snowcore, marked classified. Inside were diagrams nearly identical to those in her father's journal. They were experimenting with genetic light emission, Kieran explained. But only a few bloodlines reacted. Yours was the rarest. Alara read through the files. Her father had once warned her of what they called the glowing cure, a mythical solution that could reset dying cells. It was never supposed to be used on people, she whispered. They were going to weaponize it. Kieran's voice lowered. My grandfather believed it was power. But I think it's meant to be a gift. Later that evening, over warm tea, Kieran looked at her and asked, What do you want, Alara? She blinked. I don't know. Safety. Time. A future for my father. You could have more, he said quietly. I can protect you. Build something with you. Not just because you saved me. But because I feel something when I'm with you. Alara's heart stammered. She stood. You don't know me. Kieran stepped closer. But I want to. Not as a subject. As a partner. Silence stretched between them. And then, Alara whispered, What if the world tries to take me again? Kieran's voice was firm. Then they'll have to go through me. News travels fast in the shadows, especially when blood glows. Master Shin, Kieran's grandfather and the original founder of Shinteca's biomedical division, had been thought long retired. But in the marble quiet of a hidden lab beneath a private compound in northern Huron, he watched the surveillance footage of Alara. His face, carved by time and ambition, remained unmoved as her image glowed on the screen. She's the last, he murmured. And the strongest. His aide asked, Shall we retrieve her? Master Shin turned slowly. No. We reclaim her. She is property of Project Snowcore. Meanwhile, Alara settled into the guest quarters of the Shin estate. Though still on guard, something inside her had begun to soften. In Kieran's presence, she felt, strangely, seen. Not as a miracle. Not as a test subject. But as a person. Kieran never pushed. He walked with her through the gardens, asked about her father, brought her books, even learned to prepare her mother's old herbal soup using notes from her journal. But the calm was not meant to last. That night, as a thunderstorm rolled in once more, Alara was awakened by a sharp pain in her spine. Her skin flushed cold, her heartbeat erratic. The glow returned, but this time, violently. Downstairs, Kieran received a message. She's destabilizing. He rushed to her side. What's happening? Alara clutched his arm. Someone's trying to trigger it, remotely. They're activating something in my blood. Kieran's face turned to stone. Then we end this now. Through the rain, they fled. Not into hiding, but to the original Shintech facility, long abandoned, yet humming with buried truths. There, they uncovered the core device used to stimulate bloodlight responses, an ancient, humming machine built by Master Shin himself. Alara stood before it, trembling. This was designed to make me a weapon. Kieran reached for her hand. Then let's dismantle it together. But a voice echoed through the room. No, said Master Shin, stepping from the shadows. She is the cure. And the cure does not get to choose. Behind him stood guards, armed and loyal. You are dying, grandfather, Kieran said coldly. Let her go. I built your blood, the old man hissed. And hers will keep me alive for another century. Lightning flashed outside the broken windows of the abandoned lab. Alara stood between Kieran and his grandfather, between love and legacy, between healing and horror. Master Shin stepped forward. You think this is about power? It's about survival. Do you have any idea what your blood can do? You are the future of every broken body. Every dying empire. Alara's voice was steady. I don't want to be an empire. I want to be free. Master Shin raised his hand, and the old machine behind him whirred to life. The lights flickered. Ilara's blood began to pulse beneath her skin, glowing violently blue. Kieran pulled her behind him. "Stop this," he shouted. "She's not your experiment." But the old man smiled. "She doesn't have to be, if she accepts her place." Ilara looked at the machine. Then at the man who once tried to save a world and lost his soul instead. Then she stepped forward. And she placed her hand on the power core. Pain lanced through her body. Her veins blazed. Her heartbeat roared. The machine screamed in response. "Ilara, no!" Kieran cried, lunging toward her. "I'm not destroying myself," she whispered through the pain. "I'm destroying this." With a final push of her will, her blood surged, a tidal wave of light crashing into the heart of the machine. Circuits fried. Sparks burst from the walls. The ceiling cracked. Master Shin screamed, backing away as the world he built crumbled. Ilara fell. Kieran caught her before she hit the floor. The old machine, once the symbol of stolen destiny, collapsed in a thunder of steel and smoke. She awoke 3 days later. Sunlight warmed her face. A breeze touched her cheek. Kieran sat beside her, eyes red but shining. "You're okay. You made it." Ilara reached for his hand. "Did it work?" He nodded. "The lab's gone. Shin Biomedical will be dismantled. The project is over." "And your grandfather?" "Vanished. Probably for good." She let out a long breath. And then, softly, she asked, "Now what?" Kieran leaned forward, his voice quiet. "Now we build something better. Together." The wedding was small. Just close friends. A few scientists from the resistance who had defected. Her father, now walking slowly on his own again. Kieran didn't announce it to the press. He didn't hold a gala. He just stood in front of the woman who had changed everything. And said, "I do." Years later, Ilara stood on the balcony of a new research center, one named not for Shintech, but for something simpler. The Ilara Foundation. A place that studied healing not through control, but compassion. She felt a small tug at her dress. A little boy, wide-eyed, looked up. "Mom, will my blood ever glow like yours?" She smiled. "Maybe," she said. "But even if it doesn't, you still have the power to change the world." Kieran stepped beside her, kissed her forehead, and together they looked toward the horizon. Where the world was no longer something to fear, but something they could finally shape. Together.